Hello out there, all you wonderful people. This is Andre, the Game Idea Guy. Thank you once again for lending me your time and your ear listening into another Gamer's Thoughts discussion. And this time, I'm going to be showing you one of the other sides of my geekiness and diving into the world of versus battles just a little bit, not deeply. And on top of that, I'm going to say this off the rip. Death battle is not the holy grail of versus battles and never will be, because their information can be very spotty at times, and it's mostly due to either their personal biases or fan bias towards certain characters and popularity. So their issue is that they don't really do great research on everything that they talk about, and it seems that a lot of their stuff is rushed, even though they give themselves like 2 weeks between videos to actually do the research. And to me, I would think that they plan their seasons out for Death Battle well in advance, so they have plenty of time to actually do research on these characters in full research and have updated information. And on top of that, when Death Battle does versus battles, they don't always, but they have this weird thing of doing a composite version of a character, which means all of their feats and anti-feats all apply for every version of that character, versus utilizing a specific version of a character, which let's just call a spade a spade. There are multiple different versions of Superman. There are multiple different versions of Goku. There are multiple different versions of characters like Thor, Wonder Woman, He-Man. There are just multiple different versions of a lot of these characters, and they just seem to want to cram all of their abilities together into one. Some characters that make sense to do, others it doesn't. Say a character like Link, where all of his different versions, the experience of each one stacks because it's the same soul. It's the same soul transgressing through different bodies. The same would apply to characters like Zelda and Ganondorf. But for somebody like, say, is just pulling the character off the top of my head, Sonic. There are completely different iterations of Sonic. And also, just thinking about that doesn't also apply to the manga version of the Legend of Zelda characters. They do not apply to each other. The stories, you can infer connections between the story and the game, but the way the characters are portrayed in the story does not always apply directly to the game unless it is stated in that story or game. Need to make sure that was said. But and then you take Sonic, for instance. There are so many different iterations of Sonic. You have the video game version of Sonic, video game versions, because you have classic as well as modern, and even an era between classic and modern, which I just call that Dreamcast Sonic, because modern Sonic is the Sonic with the boost. That's how I look at it. And then you have Archie Sonic before the Genesis Wave, who had basically Toon Force abilities. Then Archie Sonic after the Genesis Wave, who was completely nerfed. And now you have IDW Sonic, who is a different version of the character. You can't stack all of their feats together as one unless you are going to do that for the opposite character in the death battle. And sometimes they don't do that, which throws things off balance. So death battle is not the holy grail of power scaling. That being said, and they are probably one of the best examples of it being done improperly, because they're very well known. That said, there are a lot of people who do power scaling and do it intelligently, whereas they assess information and things that are similar between characters like that, and try their best to come up with what works if we were to put the characters into an arena together and let them duke it out to see who would actually win under the circumstances that the characters currently hold, like the current canonical version of the characters or a specified version of each of these characters. composites are generally not utilized unless you just have so many, like the characters are nearly exactly the same. And in many cases, they are not. So, that said, and this was basically inspired by TikTok, because I've noticed that there are a lot of great comic book and anime TikTokers out there. And when it comes down to versus battles, there are a lot of people who want to jump into the fray who do it improperly. And it's like, and many of them are power scalers. And I would say that they're new to power scaling based on how they assess information. Because it's like one of those things where, like, okay, for instance, there was a guy who said that the Resurrection F or Resurrection F saga of Dragon Ball Super, when Goku got hit by that laser, the laser was leveled to where Goku was. The reason that Goku got taken out by that laser is because he completely dropped his guard. But the same person then went on to say that Goku got hurt by a bullet because he dropped his guard. So I was like, how do you not understand that? And this is a stronger version of Goku now. Now, how do you not understand that Goku got hurt by the bullet? Not because he fully dropped his guard, but he dropped it just enough to not be paying full attention to the guy that pulled the gun on him, because he was busy thinking that he had already won the fight. He had already knocked him out, because he is self-suppressed so much so he wouldn't accidentally kill the people that were trying to rob him. So when he was done thinking he had knocked everyone out, he didn't fully drop his guard, because he wouldn't have been able to react if he did. But he was able to react quick enough to block the bullet, but not quick enough to get his ki and everything up to protect himself. So he got a scratch from the bullet. Now, Dragon Ball Z characters can get hurt by bullets if they are not paying attention, or they do not have their strength, their ki, which is their life force, up protecting their body. Now, I've seen arguments back and forth that they only are protected by the ki if they have their body surrounded by it. And there are many situations in the actual anime and manga that imply that their ki is active, is just not showing because they're not exuding it. So I've seen arguments back and forth with people that I like where they agree and disagree with this. And it's like, there are logical answers to some of these things based on the story, and then there are not. So, like, it was recently come out that Kid Buu was determined to be the strongest variant of Buu based on Toriyama. Now, years prior, it was considered that Buuhan was the strongest variation of Buu that was shown. And that was through interviews prior to this situation. So maybe Toriyama forgot and changed things, or maybe he always intended it to be that way, but in that conversation he mixed some things up. We don't know. But either way, thing remains that Toriyama says that Kid Buu is the strongest version of Buu, which would mean that Goku and Vegeta at the end of Z were actually stronger than Ultimate Gohan when they fought Kid Buu. They would have to be in order to be able to fight him and Gohan not be there. And that's how you make sense of that situation. That's how you would do proper power scaling. And there are a lot of people that don't do that. They just take one instance and say, well, see, that's what happened. Just like in I want to say it's Injustice, the Injustice comics, there were sharks eating the freaking the parademons, and people were saying that those sharks are outer versal. I'm like, that doesn't make any damn sense. The parademons can be hurt by bullets and other monotonous things. They may be stronger than normal people, but they are easily able to be killed. They are fodder. So, and yes, I have heard this argument go back and forth. I'm like, how do you, that doesn't make any sense. So there are people who improperly power scale and do it just so that they can win the match with their favorite characters, instead of actually looking at the characters based on their capabilities. And I say this because there are people who will use statements from outside of the story, and granted, the writer at the time can say whatever they want, but if they didn't create the character, I feel like their statement has less weight versus somebody who has created the characters like Toriyama. He's not just the writer of Dragon Ball, he's the creator of Dragon Ball. He came up with these characters, he imagined them, whereas a lot of people who write for DC and Marvel didn't come up with those characters. Very few of them have actually come up with the characters that they write for. They're just taking the mantle from someone else, so their opinion to me has less weight. And plus, I think that's called an appeal to authority fallacy or something like that. I don't know all the terminology. But when it comes down to versus battles and debates, I typically look at what the characters are capable of doing. That's how I look at them. And yeah, I may not be right on everything, but if you look at the characters in general, based on what they are capable of doing, or the specific version of those characters and what they have been shown to do, then you generally go with that. But you can't go with a writer talking outside of that, and what they say has been completely disproven in the material that has been written. That tends to be a problem. Like, for example, and this is something I have had a personal problem with when it came down to the Mega Man community, specifically the Mega Man X community, because Keiji Inafune said Zero would never go on a murderous tirade. But the problem with that is, you've shown that he has done it before. He did it at some point, because Mega Man X4 displays that he has done it. It shows he has done it through cutscenes. It shows that he has nightmares about it, because he has at some point done it. He may not be privy to all of his memories, but he has done it. So it's like one of those things where people will say, well, that means that Zero would never have lashed out and tried to kill Mega Man if he was awakened prior to the events of Mega Man X. And I would suggest that that's the total opposite of what happened. Zero was awakened and Wily couldn't control him, which is why when they found a way to get Zero back into the capsule, he had put him under and put the virus in with him to try to control him. And the virus ended up having the opposite effect. Well, not the opposite effect. It did work. Because again, in Mega Man X4, we see that Zero is going on a tirade, killing different Reploids and destroying them. And he nearly killed Sigma. So that bugs me, because it literally fits against the narrative of the character. Now, if he's talking about Zero after he was awakened and after Sigma knocked him out and they fixed him up, yes, I can understand Zero from that standpoint forward would never do it. Because that's the Zero that's more conscious, he thinks about things, that fits his character narrative. But Zero prior to that, that character narrative makes no damn sense for him. Because he was crazy. And he was crazy due to the damn virus being flushed through his system constantly. And it even backs it up in Mega Man X5 that if he absorbs enough of the Sigma or the Zero virus, he reverts back to that form and becomes awakened Zero and becomes even stronger. So that's where I look at it, and it's just one of those things. It's like, I can understand, and granted, Keiji Inafune was the one who created Zero, but he also created the story and plotline for Mega Man X4. So him making that statement afterwards completely contradicts what he said. So when I come down to it, logically speaking, at that point, I'm going to go with the story narrative over what the writer or creator has said, because you can't argue against that. There's no way to make logical sense of it and putting it in that order. So there are a lot of things where I realize that there's a lot of improper working when it comes down to scaling and talking about characters and understanding what they do and what they're capable of. And that's one thing I've noticed with that part of any sort of debate community, because I do watch a lot of them and do listen into a lot of them, is that people don't want to fully understand the character. They want to just understand the points that they like about the character. And that tends to get lost in the sauce. Is that you have to have a better understanding of the overall character versus, oh, I like that character, so they have to win, and I have to find a way to make it logically consistent that they would win. Even if I'm being illogical, I have to find a way to cook the books in their favor for them to win. And that should never be the case. If you're going to do scaling of characters, you're going to do versus battles of characters, you should go in purely looking at the things that make the character that character and only use outside sources if those outside sources make sense with the story as it goes, or they can logically make sense with the story as it goes. So, yeah, I know that this probably went over the head of several people. Probably heard this, like, what the hell is Andre talking about? Power scaling and versus debates and stuff. If you want an example, or several examples, I have them on my YouTube channel right now, where I scale my character Heat versus a bunch of different but similar types of characters from video games, mostly Mega Man X, because that's where the inspiration of the character came from. But I scale him against other characters that are very similar to him. So it's the Heat versus playlist that's on my channel. It's Heat versus Heat Concept or something like that. That playlist is there, and I do several versus battles of Heat versus other characters. I actually want to do some updates on those discussions because I have come up with more for the character, but I also want to get the stuff written out and get the books made before I start doing that again. But that being said, I think I've run this particular discussion on long enough, and I know you guys don't really care particularly for all of the traffic noises in the background or however loud they get, but this was one of those things that was on my mind. This is, again, another side of my geekiness that I like to show sometimes. So if this discussion was interesting to you, thank you for lasting all the way through to the end of this. Outside of that, I'm pretty much done. So if there's anybody that has any comments or questions or anything that they'd like to ask or say, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for listening in. Keep your eyes and ears out for more stuff from me. And until the next time, enjoy your games and peace out.